Sigue en sintonía de nuestra programación.
La Tribuna Hispana USA es el periódico para los que leemos en español. En circulación desde 1988 en Long Island y New York City. Contamos con diferentes ediciones por zonas, impresas y digitales, donde usted puede leer las últimas noticias nacionales, internacionales y publicar sus anuncios para la comunidad. Atención empresarios, comerciantes y profesionales. Si usted desea aumentar sus ventas, llame ahora mismo al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 4, o visítenos en el www.latribunahispana.com.
Tribuna TV, 24 horas al día, 7 días a la semana, 365 días al año. Un mundo de información para ti, al alcance de tu dedo.
Escucha Tribuna Radio las 24 horas del día. Tribuna Radio desde cualquier lugar del mundo. Tribuna Radio en el www.tribunaradio.us. Tribuna Radio, la música que quieres escuchar. Tribuna Radio, la mejor programación. Tribuna Radio, programas de entrevistas. Para más información, llámanos al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 5, o escríbenos a sales@tribunaradio.us.
¿Te perdiste tu programa favorito en Tribuna TV? Esto no volverá a pasar porque ahora te presentamos videos on demand. Cualquier día, a cualquier hora y en cualquier lugar. Visita nuestra sección Videos on Demand en nuestra página web o en nuestras aplicaciones para Android y iPhone. Entra al nombre del programa que quieres ver, elígelo con un solo clic y disfruta de los mejores programas de Tribuna TV, la televisión en sus manos.
Sigue en sintonía de nuestra programación.
Ahora empieza su programa, el show del Dr. Roy Aranda. Temas sobre los efectos que tiene la separación de los niños de sus padres, traumas que afrontan los indocumentados, violencia doméstica, el porqué de la violencia en las escuelas. Llámanos en vivo al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 6, y haz tus preguntas al aire. ¡Comenzamos!
Diablo. Okay. Bueno, good evening, dear Tribuna TV viewers. Buenas noches, queridos televidentes de Tribuna TV. Today is June 11, 2020. Hoy es junio 11 del año 2020. Y estamos aquí pues otra vez en el estudio de Tribuna TV. We're here at the studio of Tribuna TV. And we have a show that I hope will be of interest and certainly useful to all of you. And I have a wonderful guest who I'll be introducing momentarily, a psychologist, Dr. David Tzall. That's spelled T-Z-A-L-L. So, David Tzall. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I had to rehearse it a little bit. So, I did want to share with you that we are approximately 3 months into the pandemic. It's actually a little bit longer than that, but when we became very aware of it, and then when we started having beginnings of closures and recommendations to stay home and flatten the curve, and if you don't have to go out, don't go out. That's closer to 3 months ago. So the show that we're doing today it's being recorded live right now on YouTube. and will be available by tomorrow on Facebook, Vimeo, and probably on other forms of social media. I also wanted to share with you that this month is very unique for me. Normally I do 2 shows a month, and this month I'll be doing a 3rd show. I thought that because of what was happening that was so significant after the killing of George Floyd, después del asesinato de George Floyd, that happened less than 3 weeks ago. It was 2 Mondays ago, on Memorial Day, and the outcry, the public outcry in terms of Black Lives Matter, and it's become such an incredible movement that in my life I have never seen anything quite like this, and it's also worldwide. So I thought that I had to have a show, and I am adding. So one of the additional shows will be for next week, Thursday, on the 18th. I will have a show with a psychologist, a good friend of mine from way back, and an attorney, civil rights attorney. We will be talking about the dual pandemics of racial violence and coronavirus. And on the 25th of this month, for pet owners, they will be delighted to know that I have a veterinarian who will be coming talking about matters pertaining to pets during COVID-19. So I think that we have some very interesting shows lined up for the rest of the month. So what I wanted to do then is just briefly introduce you to Dr. David Tzall. David, do you hear me?
You're a little bit muffled, Roy.
Okay. That's good to know. Maybe it's the weather here. It's raining a lot. At any rate, David, say hello to the viewers.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so David, I know David from New York State Psychological Association, and he is a psychologist. He's a Brooklyn-based licensed clinical psychologist who received his doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Nova Southeastern University. He has gained extensive clinical experience working in civil and forensic hospitals and with incarcerated individuals. He advocates for criminal justice reform, including the need for drug courts and mental health resources. Dr. Tzall has taught in undergraduate and graduate psychology programs. He is currently program lead for the Intensive Outpatient Treatment Program and Director of Externship Training, Adult Track at New York City Health and Hospitals at Kings County. He maintains a part-time private practice working with individuals and couples. And of course, you might all be interested in knowing what the topic is. I sort of omitted it, and I did omit to show you one of my latest acquisitions, one of my latest face masks. My wife has been very diligent. We're talking today about love in the time of COVID-19. Amor durante COVID-19, and of course one of her ways of displaying her love for me and protecting me is to get all of these face masks. So we're trying out different styles, and eventually maybe I'll land on one, and perhaps I'll see if I can have one embroidered Dr. Aranda TV show. I'll show del Dr. Roy Aranda. Maybe I'll make that my theme mask. Okay, so David, did I leave anything out?
No, I think that's it. I think you pretty much described me perfectly, Roy. Thank you.
Okay, so we have several slides. For those of you who have been watching the show, you know that I like to prepare slides that I think and hope are useful to the viewers. So I do encourage you to, pull out a camera or take photographs, or through your iPhone, take photos of any of the slides that you like for reviewing later. Once the show is recorded, you will be able certainly to take screenshots and save the slides. So I do encourage you to do that, and we're going to be going through a number of things today, talking about how this pandemic has affected our lives, how it's affected our interactions, how how it's modified our roles at home, and we're going to be talking about different kinds of situations, different kinds of problem areas and difficulties, and what are some potential solutions. And then, as I usually do at the end of the show, we'll also focus on resources that are available for the viewers. So, lo que quería hacer, por favor, primer slide, first slide. Okay. So, again, loving the time of COVID-19, and I did want to give a shout out to my consultant, Dr. Peter Canaris, who is a psychologist and a friend of mine for many years, and he helps me out when I have questions about him, and sort of like a consultant. That's what a consultant is, un consejero, Peter Canaris. So. Just to give you an introduction, during the COVID-19 pandemic, more demands are placed on us as we're tasked with being a parent, a cook, a teacher, an employee every day. We may have to work from home, take care of children. Of course, there are others who are actually going to work and then they come home. And so, again, roles are a little bit different, expectations are different. Wearing masks, having to go through certain kinds of procedures to remain safe. These are all parts of the new us during COVID-19. Parents are on top of each other. Couples who live together, we're on top of one another, basically, because we're confined much of the time, if not most of the time, to the home. Structure that once was reliable, we could count on it. We knew it was a Monday. We knew it was a Sunday. We knew it was Friday. We knew it was Hump Wednesday. I mean, we were aware of these kinds of days, and it was reliable. Oh my God, I don't have to work like one more day, then I get like 2 days of freedom. Well, that melted. That's gone. That's splintered. Now we're searching for stability, and it's it's probably an ongoing task. I don't think that really the shoe fits comfortably for everybody yet. I think that we're still in this exploring stage as things are happening around us, and we're talking about reopenings in different phases, and whether or not more states have increased rates of contamination, and what's going to happen now as a result of protests, and whether or not you're going to be able to get a haircut in a week or two. These are kinds of things that seem to be a little bit in a state of flux, in a state of limbo. We may experience role reversals. One partner may be tasked with doing more in one area than before. There are fewer outlets to cope, and what worked in the past might not work anymore. Tension, of course, can build up under these circumstances, may become overwhelming. There may be less time or space because of the limited environment that you're in. And in order to maintain physical and emotional relationships. Couples may not long for one another as much as before. With so much uncertainty, working on one's relationship may not be a priority and can result in increased anxiety. This show is going to focus on these kinds of issues with the goal of examining a number of possible solutions. Okay, so we have several slides, and I wanted to start with the second slide. I'm going to have Oscar post it. I'll read it, and then David, I want you to take it away with whatever parts of it you'd like to elaborate, okay?
Sure.
So, slide 2. Okay, yo no veo nada.
Yeah.
Okay. We now, more demands are placed on us. This is a little bit more of an elaboration from the introduction. We're tasked with being a parent, again, a cook, a teacher, employee every day. We may work from home, take care of children. Parents are on top of one another, structure is splintered. When we get thrown off track, we may react with strong emotions, like you're not used to doing something. You didn't want to get up at a certain time, or now you did get up at a certain time. You had to start work at a certain time, rent at a certain time. And that may elicit strong emotions. If you think your partner is driving you crazy, well, you're not alone. Okay, well, welcome to the club. I mean, we're getting a lot of this, a lot of things where people are, basically getting on one another's nerves. It stands to reason you're around one another almost 24/7. Even couples with healthy, strong relationships may find themselves under strain, struggling with being confined much of the time. Others may be stressed because of distance. There may be separation, so you may have, like a family member, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, children, adult children, or you may be already separated, as in divorced or separated, and you're not able to see your children. So we're having separation, or being forced to live apart due to health concerns, and possibly because of not only the health concerns, but because of being quarantined. If somebody is under quarantine, you cannot be around that person. Working couples accustomed to spending moderate time together are now working at home, sometimes finding it challenging. They're spending 24/7 together. You're losing this time to be alone, a time that you may want to be alone. One of my patients who, before the pandemic, didn't like to go out in the first place, but did go out on whatever occasion he may have wanted to, but tended to want to keep to himself and to want to find his areas of space. Inside the house now, he's so confined that he tells me that the only relief he feels is when he goes out to the porch so that he can escape and be by himself. He needs some alone time. Some couples find conflicts accelerated by the loss of personal space. Again, you're on top of one another. Couples who are older, dealing with pain, functional impairments. Some of our patients and people that we see with occupational injuries, with health problems, they may become overwhelmed, more isolated, anxious, depressed. And as for sex, well, this may not be something that's on your mind as much as before. Maybe the last thing, in fact, that's on your mind. So, Oscar, puede bajar a slide. David, please comment on any of this, and we'll just have a little bit of a discussion before we go on to the next slide.
Yeah, it's important when we talk about couples that we look at as not a homogeneous group. As it says, couples that are older are dealing with certain issues. Couples that have children, either one child or many children, are going to be dealing with different issues as well. So it's important when we look at couples that we really kind of individualize it, because you're kind of running the gamut of what couples mean. And what got me started in this was in working with couples myself. I would hear kind of anecdotally, but also as a group, that a lot of the problems they were going through, that maybe they had some strife before, or even if they were comfortable, things were going well, certainly being on top of one another to the capacity and the level that they were at was causing a lot of stress. And this is, I was hearing from a lot of either married couples or couples who were just dating, or even single people who were saying, my relationship is getting really stressful and I don't even know if I can keep it together. So it's a very important time to work on this, because there's all sorts of, as we're going to talk about later, there's all sorts of external stressors, and that has a really impactful way of becoming an internal issue in the relationship.
There may also be differences because of of health factors. So like one partner may have more health issues relative to another, and that person may be in a position now of being more of a caretaker, and also wondering about how is it that you are able to tend to the medical needs when often the doctors are not even answering the phones. You're relegated to teletherapy, and perhaps if you're lucky, you get a good video virtual session with somebody, and then how are you sitting there measuring things like blood pressure and blood sugar if you're not even able to physically see a doctor? So these are some additional burdens. I just wanted to throw that out, because disparities in terms of health, and that's obviously also going to be a function of age. And I didn't mention it, but of course you may have children with different needs. So a child could have a special needs, history of special education, and another one doesn't. A child may have health needs, whereas another one doesn't. Again, this places more of a burden on the parents or on the parent who's taking care of the children. Puede ponerme slide 3. I wanted to look now at some additional aspects of these kinds of issues and frustrations that we are facing. ¿Ya está? So role reversals. They can either be role reversals or modifications of roles. They don't have to be complete role reversals. But you don't basically get you may not get a break from the roles that you've chosen. And on top of not getting a break from your role, you suddenly have new roles. There's something else that's thrown upon you. One partner may be tasked with doing more in one area than previously. I have, for instance, one patient who is not that skilled with using the computer. So in terms of helping children with homeschooling, was really in a position of not being able to offer much help. On the other hand, the mother, who was pretty good with the computer, became the one whose task was to do the homeschooling, to the point that it became solely her role. It was just her role to do the homeschooling, and as a result of that, there's a little bit of friction, because, well, I'm doing this, what are you doing while I'm doing this? So there can be some mounting strain when you're really not sure. You take on new roles that you weren't expecting to have before. And a lot of those new roles, as I mentioned, like the homeschooling, stems precisely because of the pandemic. So it's precisely because of that. Having teletherapy, having video conferences with doctors and things like that, that's completely new because of COVID-19. So we may have more demands, fewer outlets for coping, and as a result of that, tension builds up and can become overwhelming. And once things get overwhelming, it's easier to become irritable, chronically angry, and at times, even to have some sort of an explosive outburst. So, puedes sacar a slide. David, any comments on that, on these?
Yeah, it's when we talk about, especially for, let's say, parents. I work with families, and they're not getting a break. So school was a natural break, work was a natural break, going out shopping, eating. There were all these kind of natural breaks, and unfortunately, they're not there anymore. Right, a lot of families might be quarantining, or they might be leaving the city and having to maybe live in different surroundings. So all these different breaks that we had may have broken down. And when you talk about what worked in the past may not work any longer, that's really important, because we rely on certain coping strategies. We rely on, as a couple, or even individually, so okay, I'm going to make it through here, I'm going to get from A to B. And a lot of those that worked for us in the past may not work anymore because of all the stress, because of what's going on. So it's even more important to be able to communicate what our needs are, so we know how to get out of it. Because there's either, there's different strategies for in communication with a partner, with another person. We either stop it before it gets to its height, or we're able to walk it back once it gets there. And again, couples who have been together for a long time might have a natural rhythm, and that rhythm can get disrupted, even for the best of couples.
You mentioned something, and I wanted to go a little bit further in it. You're talking about coping strategies, and we tend to think of coping strategies as being healthy, adaptive, things that are useful for us. But not all things that we do to cope must be adaptive or healthy, and there are maladaptive coping reactions. So can you imagine, and I just wanted to throw this out at you, David, but let's say, when we're talking about stress piling up, and you become angry, and you can't go out to take a walk. Maybe you can if you have a backyard, or you have like you have a private block in front of you. If you're living in the middle of Manhattan, I think your options are a lot more limited. So like it also is going to depend on where you are in the context. But if you become really, really angry and bitter doesn't that in some way affect how you think? And wouldn't that in some ways, given that it affects how you think, and your thinking perhaps isn't as clear as it would be if you're emotionally relaxed and stable, wouldn't that possibly lead to maladaptive coping reactions?
Yeah, I would say, I would definitely say so. It's important because, in another sense, what the kinds of roles, as you mentioned, that we established, they can change pretty quickly. So there are a lot of different things that we can do, and it's a matter of prioritizing them. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but prioritizing it and having it be important for our lives. If you've been a couple for a while, you may have prioritized your relationship and sort of set it on autopilot, and now you're looking that you have to kind of go back and figure out some new strategies for you that you may not have known before.
Okay, we're going to be just for the viewers to be aware. What David and I are doing now, we're going through a variety of different areas that are potentially problematic. Some of the things that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in relationships and families and couples that are causing some sort of friction or potential friction. As we move forward, we do have probably 3 slides that we're going to share with you of solutions, things that you can do. So surely in those 3 pages, in those 3 slides, there hopefully will be some things that are good for you to take away and good for you to try to incorporate into your lifestyle now, to see what you can do to improve, strengthen relationships, bring a little bit more joy and harmony into your life. Slide 4, el que sigue. Oh, I forgot, viewers, I made a big mistake. I didn't introduce Oscar. Oscar's part of the group here. He didn't say hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Oscar's my source of support here.
Yeah.
My role expectation with him has not deviated since the beginning. We've kept the same role. Okay, so less time or space to be intimate. This is like another area of a domain, basically. The size, your little universe, your little sphere where you live. The stress can be very real. Why? Because you're talking about dealing with children at home, financial concerns, of the very realistic job loss for so many, illnesses affecting a family member, a friend, uncertainty about what's going to happen next. I didn't add, but thinking about it, I could have added dealing with elderly parents, or dealing with elderly family member, dealing with a family member who is ill and requires special attention. So that's certainly areas of real stress. There may be physical distancing, as I mentioned up front, emotional distancing, where you sort of you push a partner away. You're not investing in laughing or in sharing love or in joy. Sort of like you back off. You back off, and there's like this blandness, distancing, aloofness, and you're relating to that person. It's free of emotions. It's not a sexy time, you're not watching people, especially, with getting, hairdos and beauty parlors and dressing up and all of that. It's, we don't have that much. That's the, in quotes, the sexy quality of our life with our loved ones, certainly our partners. That's not quite the same as it was before. Couples may not long for one another as much. Some libidos will be down. Some will be up. The increase or decrease in libido, however, I just wanted to share with you in general, is a normal response to a crisis. So it's not necessarily something that you have to pull a panic button. It's normal. It comes with stress. It's associated with stress. You need to understand that some of these things are certainly normal, not abnormal, normal reactions to stress. Changes may increase anxiety, can interfere with sexual desire. Working on the relationship may not be a priority. So here, basically, I just wanted to share that it's important not to get caught in the mental trap, in the cognitive distortion, the cognitive belief that somehow your expectations have to be the same as they were pre-COVID. They're not. Do away with whatever it was with pre-COVID. We are now COVID life. So now you have to deal with a life in COVID. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. That's what we're trying to put out there, that there are things that you can work on to make this good. It's not all bad. Allow a period of adjustment, settle into a new normal with your partner. Don't overreact, stay calm, work on good, intimate communication. Put this back on a slide. David, commentary?
Yeah, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he said, well, you know what, it's just not a sexy time. And it can be hard with all these stressors to think about physical intimacy, think about sex, think about joining in that way. What also might have to happen is planning. So planning date night, planning having some physical time together. And what might be new for couples is that might not feel organic, right? It may not feel spontaneous. Like, hey, let's set aside this time together to do this or to talk like this. And couples may think, well, why do I have to do that though? It should have come naturally, kind of like what you were saying about not overreacting or there's a period of adjustment. So the idea of having to plan for intimacy, whether it's emotional intimacy, set aside time to talk or get to know each other and how they're doing, or physical intimacy. And that might be new because it may feel forced. But what we know about physical intimacy, at least, is there's kind of a fake until you make it. So even if it's forced, there's a sense that we might get into it more. We might start to enjoy it more. So even though it may start off a little bit planned, a little bit inorganic than what couples might be used to, there's the idea that the kind of passion can take over and it can start to feel like it did before. So it's go ahead.
It's almost like you're living with the playbook. You have to pull out your pocket calendar and check what's scheduled for the day. I can see somebody making like a wonderful cartoon about it, with one person saying, "Oh, it's 5 o'clock. It's time for intimacy," and the other one saying, "Wait a second. In my appointment book, I have it for 6 o'clock. What happened? Where did we go wrong with the communication?" I think obviously I'm trying to be humorous here, but the notion of having the artificiality of in some way having to schedule things and having to abide by or live with the schedule book for certain kinds of things like intimacy does add an amount of artificiality, and I guess does weaken the response and makes it almost in some instances look like a burden. It's different, very different. The intimacy calendar, so to speak, is very different than a calendar that you have for organizing your activities around work, around schooling, around when you might take a break in between work, things like that. I think that that type of a planning and that type of of being meticulous and organized probably will work very well over time. Then you modify. You shave 5 minutes here, you add 5 minutes there. You try to find out, what are your better days when it comes to concentrating. What are your days that you're better for doing something new? When you're cognitively more alert, when is it that you need to lay back a little bit more? You can probably figure that over a period of time, so that you know that maybe Wednesday half a day for you is the time that you need to take off. That's something you can probably figure it out. But the piece of being...
I think what's also important is that small gestures can go a long way as well. So if after you put the kids to bed, if you have kids, or if you're without kids, just dressing up for dinner. I know that's something I've talked about with couples as a really easy solution. They're just wearing their sweats or their work clothes, and just putting on something nice might be something they haven't done in 3-4 months. So again, small gestures can go a really long way in terms of trying to build that intimacy to get partners closer together.
Okay. So we're going to start moving into positives and then solutions now that we've covered, I think, given the viewers a thorough overview of, the different kinds of aspects of things that might be stressful in our lives during this time of the pandemic. Por favor, el 5, slide 5. We're going to start shifting into the area of positives, and then a whole plethora, 50, I think, solutions. So positives. What could be positive? Well, this is a time, you have plenty of time. This is a time you can get to know your partner better. I mean, if you were, part of your routine was away from the home 5 days a week, X number of hours, even when you came home, you brought some of your work home, the kids and so forth occupying a certain amount of time, going for religious services, who knows what, recreational kinds of things. Before you know it, it was, really not all that much time in terms of a total 100% of your time. That was really dedicated to knowing or talking to your partner. So this is a good opportunity to really talk more and get to know your partner better. We have choices now in terms of how we act, how we react to things, what decisions we make about how to spend our time, and basically how we go about treating those around us. The kids, spouse, parents, siblings, friends, other loved ones, and so forth. So a lot of this is possible now because of the changes, and certainly we continue to exercise control over our behaviors, including, again, actions, reactions, how we choose to spend our time, and how we treat other people. How we think and how we feel, this is certainly something that we are in charge of that. We have the control of it, okay? It's us. It's within us to be able to control those things. So let's start looking at some of the solutions. So David, I hope you came prepared because there's about 50 of them. So we're going to start with slide 6. So viewers, again, televidentes, quieren sacar fotos. If you want to take photos, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to go over here. Okay, some of it may overlap, may be a little bit repetitive, redundant, but I think redundancy is probably not a bad thing. Repetition is probably a good thing. ¿Tienes los 6? So starting out at the top, you need to carve out some time to be alone. Communicate, express your needs. When I feel this way right now, like I'm trying to do my work. It's not my time for me to look at a show that you're watching on TV and comment on it, even though you seem to want to do that and you would like for me to comment on it, but I can't because I'm doing something else. So you need to express and communicate your needs. You need to establish a routine. We've already talked about that at length. Manage expectations. What are your expectations? Are you continuing to work? Are you the one who is expected to get the checks? Are you doing the homeschooling? Are you making the phone calls? Are you making the arrangements to cook? Are you making the arrangements to tend to the children when they go to bed? Are you making the arrangements to take care of your elderly parents or other family members as needed? Respect boundaries. The example that I gave you, like right now I need my space. Right now I'm involved in preparing a report. It's important for me to do the report because it's due tomorrow. So I have to have this report done. If you don't respect that, it's going to create probably some frustration. I'm going to feel a little frustrated, a little like you're not interested in how I feel or think or what my needs are. So basically, you need to really think and respect those boundaries. Put yourself to a certain extent in the thought, in the mind of the other person, and try to appreciate how that person is feeling. Prioritize the relationship, and by that I mean the relationship should be a priority. Okay, you have a spouse, you have a loved one, you have children, you have parents, siblings, and so forth. These are relationships that deserve to be prioritized highly in your life. Appreciate, make time for one another, what David was saying before. Things like keep up good relationships with friends and family. Use available technology. I'm pretty sure that another positive side of the pandemic is that it's forced a lot of people who probably were weaker in computer skills, in internet kinds of skills, in social media skills. I'm pretty sure that it opened up the door for them to become more self-sufficient, more reliant, more willing to experiment, and more adept at really maneuvering these things. I had no idea before the pandemic what it meant to have a virtual reality doctor's visit with my doctor. I had absolutely no idea. And now I've got this APW and who knows what, and DoxyMe and Heartbeat and who knows what, all of these apps that I never knew existed before. So I was forced to become far more skilled in my maneuvering the technology, and I don't see that as a bad thing. Strengthen and broaden your support system. Well, you tend to think of support system, people who live with you, near you, walking distance. You can go in the car, drive to visit them. Well, obviously that's a little bit more difficult now. But again, social media, okay, WhatsApp, FaceTime, many other ways that you can communicate and maintain contact and broaden your support. I will share something that came as a complete and total surprise to me today, David. I wasn't even planning to bring this up on the show. I just thought about it now. But I had promoted this particular show through social media, several groups, and I reached out to my alumni law school group. And I put it out, a little reminder about the show for today. And all of a sudden, my iPhone rings, and I see this guy. I'm not going to say the last name, but I'll say the first name, Keith. And I saw Keith, and I saw the last name, and I said, "What on earth does he want? What's he calling me for?" And I answered the phone, and he says, "Wow," he says, "Roy, I saw what you posted, and we haven't spoken in years." And I said, "Oh my God." That's an example of broadening my support system. We went to law school together. It goes back quite a while. And it was just so wonderful that somebody actually took the time to reach out and communicate with me when otherwise I wouldn't have spoken to him. The odds are pre-pandemic, I wouldn't have spoken to him. He wouldn't have called me. There would have been no contact. So talk openly, be willing to compromise with your loved ones. Disagree fairly. Okay, so I want to see this movie, I want to see that movie. You're controlling the remote. Well, why shouldn't I have access to the remote? Well, because you control the remote all the time. Okay, start balancing it out. Okay, reach some compromise. Disagree in a way that's respectful and fairly. Set boundaries around digital use, like the TV, computers, iPad, iPhone, social media, whatever. Make a plan to spend meaningful time together. You were talking about that before, David. When feathers are ruffled, listen and take breaks. It's more difficult now to walk out the door and take a breather. You may need to distance yourself by getting up out of the room and going to the bathroom, going to the bedroom, going somewhere else. But you may negotiate that with your partner ahead of time so that your partner knows that what you're doing really is meant to bring you down and meant to calm you down so that you can re-enter the picture and be a little bit more amenable to having a reasonable conversation. Talk about unhealthy coping mechanism. I don't like the fact that you're drinking every day. I used to do it only on weekends. Now, I noticed that you're taking a glass of wine twice a day. I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy that you're going to social media all the time. I really don't like some of these things that you're bringing into the relationship now. Put that behind a slide. David, a lot of stuff there for you.
Yeah, there's, in terms of the taking the breaks, I think that's so important, because some people think, well, if we're disagreeing, if we're having a fight, we kind of have to see it through, right, from A to Z. And it can be so important that when anyone in that couple gets overheated, that they get too emotionally aroused, that they say, you know what, I need to take a break. Let's hit pause. I need 5 minutes to myself. I need an hour to myself. And not to necessarily take it as personalizing it or as something negative, when in actuality, by you stepping away, so much more can come from it. So I think that's great communication advice at any time, that more couples should probably take time apart, again, for however long each one decides and decide together, as a result. And to talk about some of the solutions here, kind of dovetail what you said before about the positives and about getting to know your partner in a better way. Sometimes we, especially if one of the individuals works from home or both work from home, we sometimes only know our partner in certain situations, certain environments, right? You're the parent, or you're the significant other, but we don't maybe get to see our partner in their work environment, how they talk to their boss, how they talk to their colleagues, how they talk to anyone around them. I'm reminded of a tweet I saw once, and it said, I didn't know that I was married to the kind of man that would say, let's circle back, right? So that is really positive, because again, we're knowing our partner in a different, intimate way than we might have ever gotten a chance for, if not for the lockdown and having to change our daily routines. So there's, even though it can be disruptive, I think an important piece is there are so many different positives that can come from this that can have you be stronger together afterward.
I think it's so important. No, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Were you done, David?
Yeah, sorry.
I think that it's really so important not to get stuck in this negative frame where you're thinking negative, bad, catastrophizing. And I think that that's unhealthy. It doesn't lead to really any advantageous solutions. Probably creates frustration, ill feelings, depression, maybe increases anxiety, probably is one of the reasons why you may start becoming irritable or angry. But I think that somehow, to the extent that you can, it's like taking a record and changing the record from side A to side B. If side A was really, becoming lousy, change the record to side B. And on side B, look for the kinds of things that are there that are positive. Or you have a blackboard that's got all this stuff scribbled on it, and you erase it, and you take a piece of chalk, and you start writing things. Today, I'm going to smile. Today, I'm going to say good morning to my children. Today, I'm going to surprise my spouse and bring her breakfast in bed. Today, I'm going to do this. Try to write a positive script. Try to write things that you can do. Try to write positive affirmations. And I think you'll really be surprised that that there's a lot of good that's out there despite the ugliness of this pandemic. It is what it is right now. We have to live with this, and we have to make the best that we can. But that doesn't mean that it's got to be all bad. There's, as you can see, there's so much that's good. David, I recall from my studies at Rutgers University, I go certainly a couple of years before you age-wise, but I remember one of my mentors was the late, wonderful Arnold Lazarus, and we spent a lot of time talking about assertiveness training and assertiveness therapy. And this is probably not a bad time to maybe share with the viewers a little bit of what it means to be assertive, as opposed to to being overly passive or overly aggressive. Is that something that you think that you can talk about for like a minute or two?
Yeah, assertive is an approach in interacting with someone else. It's also a communication style. And when we talk about being assertive, kind of the underpinning of that is partially knowing what we want and then being able to express it. As I like to say, being deliberate, right? Knowing what we want and then asking for it. Because also around assertiveness training is that there's nothing the matter. There's nothing wrong with asking what we want. There's nothing the matter with recognizing what we need. So when we're assertive, we're not demanding it. We're not saying we need it or there's going to be a consequence. But we're asking for it and also realizing that the other person may not be able to give it to us either at that time, that day, or maybe not at all. So it's really important to be able to, again, stand up for yourself and recognize that, because some either couples or some individuals may not be as assertive as they could be, which can lead to miscommunication or fighting or just a misunderstanding.
Going back to the example that I gave you before about, say, my wife wanting to look at a particular show or something on TV, and my saying I have to focus on writing this report that's due tomorrow. If I were to say, I can't talk to you right now, I'm doing this report, leave me alone. That's not being assertive, right, David?
Not necessarily, no. I mean,
that's being aggressive.
It's good that you know what you need and want, but certainly the delivery is can make the other person feel attacked.
It's aggressive. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if on the other hand she goes on, and I sit there and I'm brooding and I'm sulking and I say nothing, that's not assertive either. That's being passive. Okay, I'm sort of like just relenting, giving in, but then I'm brooding about it, and I'm not saying anything. Obviously, I'm not going to get what I want by doing it. So, assertively, which is like you use an I statement. I am the one, not you. You're not making me feel this way. I'm feeling this way. So basically, you say, honey,